The night Emily's world fell apart began like any other. The city outside her apartment glowed with soft yellow lights, the hum of cars steady in the distance. She was sitting on the couch waiting for her husband Mark to come home. It was too late. The dinner she had prepared sat cold on the table. When his message finally arrived, it wasn't an apology. It was a truth she never expected to read. He said he needed space, that he had been seeing someone else, that he didn't want to hurt her anymore. Her phone slipped from her hand, and for a moment, she just sat there in silence, staring at the wall as if trying to understand how love could disappear so quietly. Her first instinct was denial. Mark had been distant lately, yes, but he was just stressed at least. That's what she had told herself every time he came home late, every time he turned away when she reached for him. But now the words were right there in front of her, impossible to unsee. Her chest tightened. The apartment, once filled with warmth, now felt like a stranger's home. Every photograph on the wall suddenly felt like a lie. Every smile a reminder of something that no longer existed. Emily didn't scream or cry right away. Instead, she sat perfectly still, as if movement would make it more real. The clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Life went on, but she couldn't. She wanted to call someone, anyone, but shame held her back. She didn't want pity. She didn't want to explain. She wanted comfort, but the kind that didn't ask for words. And somehow, in that fog of heartbreak, a single name came to her mind: Liam. Liam had been her closest friend in college. They used to talk for hours, sharing dreams about the future, making each other laugh when the world felt heavy. But time had pulled them apart. He moved to another city, she got married, and life took its turns. Still, something in her heart whispered that he was the one person who would understand her silence. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through her contacts. His name was still there. She hadn't called him in years, but that night she didn't care. She pressed call. The phone rang twice before his calm voice came through. "Emily," he said, his tone surprised but gentle. She tried to answer, but her throat closed. Only a broken sob escaped. There was a long pause on the other end. Then his voice softened even more. "Where are you?" She hesitated. "Home," she whispered. "I'm coming," he said without another question. The next 20 minutes passed in slow motion. Emily sat by the window, her arms wrapped around herself, trying to stop shaking. The rain began to fall outside, quiet at first, then steady. The sound filled the empty room like a lullaby for her heartbreak. She didn't turn on the lights. She didn't move when the knock came at her door. She just whispered, "Come in," because she already knew it was him. Liam stepped inside, dripping from the rain, his eyes filled with concern. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. One look at her tear-streaked face told him everything. He took off his jacket, laid it over a chair, and walked toward her slowly, as if afraid she might break. "Hey," he said softly. "You're not alone, okay?" The words broke her. She covered her face with her hands and finally cried, really cried. All the pain, betrayal, and confusion poured out in uneven breaths. Liam didn't try to stop her. He didn't offer empty promises or quick advice. He just sat beside her, his presence steady and quiet. After a while, when her sobs turned to trembling silence, he got up and went to the kitchen. The clinking of a mug, the hiss of the kettle, small, ordinary sounds that somehow made her feel safe. He came back with a cup of tea and handed it to her. "You used to drink this when exams stressed you out?" he said with a faint smile. She took it with shaking hands, managed a small nod. The warmth of the cup against her palms was the first thing that didn't hurt. They sat like that for a long time. The rain still falling outside. She didn't tell him the details, and he didn't ask. They talked about anything else: the weather, their old college days, the music they used to love. Slowly, her shoulders relaxed, the storm inside her softening just enough to let her breathe. At one point, she looked at him and said quietly, "I thought I knew what forever meant." Liam met her eyes, his expression full of empathy. Sometimes forever just means as long as it's meant to. It doesn't make it less real. His words lingered in the air, honest and kind. She turned back toward the window, watching the rain trace paths down the glass. For the first time that night, she felt something other than pain. She felt seen. Midnight passed. The clock ticked toward 2. Liam stayed. They didn't talk much anymore, just sat together in comfortable silence. The storm outside began to fade, leaving only the soft drip of water from the eaves. Emily's eyes grew heavy, her body drained from hours of emotion. She leaned her head against the back of the couch. And before she could stop herself, it rested gently against Liam's shoulder. He didn't move away. He just sat there, steady and quiet, his hand resting on the cushion beside hers, close enough to feel but not to cross a line. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was human. It was compassion. By the time she drifted off, the world outside was calm again. The rain had stopped, the streets below shimmering under the glow of streetlights. Inside, the only sound was her slow, even breathing. Liam looked at her, the woman he'd once known as unstoppably, and felt his heart ache for her strength, for her brokenness, for the quiet courage it took just to keep breathing after betrayal. He stayed awake most of the night. Not because he wanted to, but because he couldn't leave her like that. Every time she shifted or sighed, he whispered softly, "It's okay," though she couldn't hear him. As dawn approached, light crept through the curtains, painting the room in pale gold. Emily stirred but didn't wake. Liam stood up slowly, stretched his stiff legs, and looked around the apartment one last time, the photos on the wall, the untouched dinner, the faint smell of cold tea. It wasn't just sadness he saw, it was life, still waiting to be rebuilt. He left a note on the table before slipping out quietly. "Didn't want to wake you. You're stronger than you think. Call me if you need anything. L." When Emily woke later that morning, she found the note and read it twice. Her chest ached, but for the first time since her heart had shattered, she felt something new hope. The pain hadn't gone, but it no longer owned her, and though she didn't know it yet. That single night, the night he stayed, would become the beginning of everything she never expected to find again. The morning after Liam left, Emily sat at the kitchen table with his note still in her hand. The sun peeked through the blinds, bright and soft, but she didn't feel ready to face another day. Her heart was sore, her thoughts tangled. She read his words again. "You're stronger than you think." A part of her wanted to believe it. Another part didn't. The days that followed blurred together. She went to work, smiled when she had to, and pretended everything was fine. But inside, the ache lingered. Every time her phone buzzed, she hoped it was Mark apologizing, saying it was all a mistake. It never was. The silence between them grew heavier with each passing day. A week later, on a cold Friday evening, Emily found herself driving without direction. She didn't want to go home. Every corner of that apartment reminded her of broken promises. She ended up in front of an old bookstore downtown, the same one she and Liam used to visit after classes. She parked, stared at the front window glowing softly under the streetlights. And before she could think, she walked inside, and there he was. Liam, standing by the counter with a cup of coffee, flipping through a novel. He looked up, surprised but not shocked, as if he had been expecting her all along. "Emily," he said, his smile warm but careful. "Didn't think I'd see you here." She gave a small, tired laugh. "Guess I just needed a quiet place." They talked for a few minutes, simple things at first. Then he said, "You look like you haven't been sleeping much." "Case," she said softly. "Sleep isn't easy when your heart's still catching up to reality." Liam nodded, his expression kind. "Then maybe you need company tonight. Not to talk about him, not to fix anything, just company." He hesitated, but didn't say no. Something about his presence made her feel steady, like the world wasn't spinning so fast anymore. Later that evening, they walked to a small cafe nearby. It was quiet, half empty, the kind of place where you could breathe. The waitress recognized them from years ago and smiled. "Still together?" She teased lightly, not knowing how the question hit them both. Emily blushed. "No," she said quickly, her voice low. Liam just smiled politely and changed the subject, sparing her the embarrassment. Over coffee they talked, not about heartbreak or betrayal, but about life. About how everything had changed and how some things hadn't. Liam told her about his work, his family, the new town he'd moved to. She told him about her art, the small gallery she'd been dreaming to open but never had the courage to. For a moment, it felt like the world before everything went wrong. When they left, the night air was cold but refreshing. The streets were shiny from earlier rain. Emily shivered, and Liam instinctively took off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. She didn't protest. The warmth of it made her eyes sting, not from the cold, but from the kindness she hadn't felt in so long. They walked 4 blocks without speaking. The silence between them wasn't heavy this time. It was peaceful. When they reached her apartment building, she turned to him. "You want to come up? I could make tea." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Sure, but only if you promise not to cry over cold tea this time," he said, trying to lighten the mood. She smiled for the first time that night. Inside, the apartment felt different. It still carried traces of the past, but Liam's presence made it softer. He helped her tidy the place a little, humming quietly as he moved around. It was ordinary, simple, but somehow comforting. When the tea was ready, they sat on the couch again. Like before, Emily finally spoke what had been sitting on her chest. "He didn't even try, Liam, after everything we built together. He just walked away. I keep wondering what I did wrong." Liam set his cup down. "You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes people leave not because we failed them, but because they don't know how to stay." His words were calm but carried weight. She looked at him, searching for something, maybe understanding, maybe hope. "Do you ever think love runs out?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "Love doesn't run out. It just changes where it lives." The simplicity of it made her chest tighten. For a long moment, neither spoke. She felt tears coming again, but pushed them back. Instead, she leaned her head lightly on his shoulder. Liam didn't move. He didn't say anything. He just sat there, his breathing steady, his warmth grounding her. She didn't need explanations or promises. Just that moment, 2 people sitting close in a world that had been so cold for so long. Hours passed. The conversation drifted from serious to light, from memories to silly stories from college days. Emily found herself laughing, really laughing, and the sound surprised her. Liam looked at her with a faint smile, that quiet, familiar smile that made her remember who she was before the heartbreak. As the night deepened, her energy faded. She curled up on the couch, her eyes half closed, while Liam adjusted the blanket around her shoulders. "You should rest," he whispered. "Stay a bit," she murmured, almost asleep. "I'll stay," said softly. He didn't move for hours. The only sounds were the ticking clock and the hum of the city outside. He watched her drift into sleep, her face calm for the first time in days. He thought about how unfair life could be, how someone as kind as her had to carry so much pain. But he also thought about how strong she was, even in her silence. The night was long, but peaceful. He dozed off beside her for a while, his arm resting gently along the back of the couch. When he woke, it was dawn again. The light spilled through the window, catching dust in golden streaks. He looked at her sleeping, her head resting near his shoulder, and smiled faintly. Emily stirred, blinking slowly. "Did you stay all night again?" she asked, her voice soft. "Yeah," he said simply. "Guess I couldn't leave you alone with that cold tea." She laughed quietly, shaking her head. "You're too kind, Liam." "Not kind," he said. "Just—" Here, that morning felt different from the last one. The pain was still there, but not as sharp. Emily felt lighter, as if a part of her had been stitched back together. Liam helped her make breakfast, simple toast and eggs. And they ate in easy silence. When it was time for him to leave, she walked him to the door. "Thank you," she said, meaning more than just for the night. He smiled. "You don't have to thank me, Em. Just take care of yourself." As he stepped into the hallway, she caught his hand for a moment, a small, wordless gesture that said, "I needed this. I needed you." He squeezed her hand gently and left. When the door closed, Emily stood there for a while, listening to the quiet. It wasn't empty anymore. It carried something new, warmth, hope, maybe even the first hint of healing. That night when she lay in bed. She thought about Liam's words. Love doesn't run out. It just changes where it lives. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But she knew this much. She wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time since her heart had broken, that was enough. The morning sunlight spilled softly through Emily's curtains, painting the room in a golden hue. The city outside was already awake, but inside her apartment, time felt slower, gentler. Emily opened her eyes and found herself leaning against Liam's shoulder. For a second, she froze, then smiled faintly. His steady breathing, the calm on his face, the quiet kindness in his presence, it all made her heart feel something it hadn't in a long time. Safe. She sat up slowly, trying not to wake him, but Liam's eyes opened the moment she moved. "Morning," he said, his voice still rough from sleep. "Did you stay up again?" she asked softly. He chuckled, stretching his arms. "Didn't want to risk spilling your tea if I moved." Emily rolled her eyes but couldn't help smiling. "You're impossible." He grinned, but his eyes lingered on her a little longer than they should have. There was something different in the air, something neither of them could quite name. She stood and walked to the kitchen, brushing her hair back and trying to shake the warmth that spread through her chest. "Coffee?" she asked, pretending her voice wasn't trembling. "Always," he replied. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the room. They sat at the table, the sunlight between them, quiet but comfortable. Emily watched the steam rise from her cup and said softly, "I used to love mornings. They felt full of possibilities. Now they just remind me of what's gone." Liam stirred his coffee, thoughtful. "Maybe they remind you because you're still looking back. You can't start something new if you're still standing in yesterday." She looked at him, eyes tired but curious. "And what if I don't know how to move forward?" "Then," he said gently, "you start small. You wake up, you make coffee, you take a breath, and you try again." Something about his calm made her want to believe him. For the first time since everything fell apart. The world didn't feel so heavy. After breakfast, Liam offered to help her fix the broken cabinet door in the kitchen. It was something Mark had promised to repair months ago but never did. As Liam worked, Emily leaned against the counter, watching. The small act meant more to her than he could ever know. He wasn't just fixing wood and hinges. He was mending something invisible inside her. "You were always good at this," she said softly. He looked up, smiling. "Still remember when you tried to build a bookshelf in college? We ended up with a pile of wood and 3 missing screws." She laughed, covering her face. "That was your fault. You distracted me." "Pretty sure you were the one who dropped the hammer," he teased. For a moment, the air between them was light, filled with old memories and something new that neither of them dared to name. When the cabinet was fixed, Emily thanked him and he shrugged it off like it was nothing. But she saw it the quiet way he cared, the way he filled her silence without taking over it. Later, they stepped outside for some air. The park near her apartment was glowing with spring sunlight. Children played on the grass, dogs chased sticks, and the world looked normal again. Emily hadn't realized how much she had missed feeling part of it. They walked side by side, not touching but close enough that their steps fell in rhythm. "It feels strange," she admitted. Being out, smiling again. "It's not strange," Liam said. "It's healing. You just forgot what peace felt like." She stopped walking and looked at him. "And what about you? You always seem so put together. Don't you ever get lonely?" He hesitated before answering. "Sometimes. But I learned that being alone doesn't mean being empty." His words settled deep in her heart. She had spent weeks fearing the silence, thinking it meant she had failed. But now, standing there under the sunlight, she realized maybe silence could mean something else. Maybe it was where strength began. They found a bench under a maple tree and sat down. The breeze carried the smell of flowers. Emily tilted her face up toward the sky, letting the sun touch her skin. For a moment, she forgot everything that hurt. Liam watched her quietly, admiring the way her expression softened, how her shoulders finally seemed lighter. "You're stronger than you think," he said again, almost to himself. Emily turned to him, smiling faintly. "You keep saying that." "Because one day you'll believe it," he replied. There was a pause, gentle, not awkward. Then she said, "I'm glad you came that night." "Glad you called," he answered simply. The conversation drifted to lighter things travel, music, the funny things they used to do. When Emily laughed, it was full and real, not the polite sound she used to make around others. Liam noticed. It made his heart tighten. After a while, they decided to head back. As they reached her apartment building, Emily stopped by the steps and looked at him. "You should come by tomorrow. I'll make dinner. Something simple." He hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she said, smiling. "You've been feeding me comfort and advice for days. I think I owe you pasta." He laughed. "Then it's a deal." That night, when Emily was alone again, she felt a strange calm settle over her. The ache was still there, but softer. She stood by the window, looking out at the city lights, and thought about how just one person's kindness had changed everything. The next day came quickly. She spent the afternoon cleaning, not out of obligation, but out of quiet excitement. It had been a long time since she looked forward to someone's company. When Liam arrived, the smell of garlic and butter filled the air. "You weren't kidding," he said, smiling. "You really did make pasta," she laughed. "I told you, I'm trying to start small." They ate, talked, and laughed until the evening slipped into night. The city lights outside glimmered, and inside, Emily felt something she hadn't dared to hope for, contentment. After dinner, Liam stood to leave. Emily followed him to the door, not wanting the night to end. He looked at her, his eyes gentle but unreadable. "I should go," he said quietly. "Thank you." "For everything," she said. He nodded. "You don't have to thank me, Emily. Just promise me something. Don't let what broke you stop you from believing in love again. It's still out there. Maybe closer than you think." Her breath caught. The words hung between them, charged but careful. She didn't know what to say. He smiled softly, opened the door, and stepped into the hallway. As he walked away, Emily felt her heart beat faster, not in pain this time, but in something unfamiliar, something hopeful. She closed the door and leaned against it, smiling to herself. The apartment was quiet again, but it didn't feel lonely. It felt alive. She made her way to the couch, picked up the note he had left the week before, and read it once more. "You're stronger than you think." This time, she finally believed it, and though she didn't know where this path with Liam would lead, she knew one thing for certain. The night he stayed had changed everything. He had given her something her broken heart thought it would never feel again. A reason to look forward to tomorrow. 2 weeks passed since that quiet dinner with Liam, and Emily's life had begun to move forward again, gently but surely. The mornings didn't hurt as much anymore, and she no longer woke up dreading the silence. Started painting again, something she hadn't done since before her marriage began to crumble. Her colors were different, now softer, warmer, like the sunrise after a long storm. But even as her days filled with small bits of peace, one thought lingered in her mind. Liam. He hadn't called since that night, not because of anger or distance, but because that was just the kind of man he was: quiet, respectful, patient. Emily wanted to reach out, but fear stopped her. She didn't know what she wanted from him, only that she missed his voice, his calm. The way he made her feel safe without saying much at all. Then one afternoon, while running errands near the park, she saw him. He was sitting at an outdoor cafe, reading a book. The same easy posture, the same calm energy that had always drawn her in. She hesitated for a second, then smiled and walked toward him, still reading instead of working. She teased lightly. Liam looked up, his face breaking into that familiar smile, still teasing instead of saying hello. They both laughed, and in that moment, it was like no time had passed. He stood, pulled out a chair for her, and said, "Join me." She nodded and sat down. The breeze was soft, the sun gentle. The world around them felt peaceful. And for the first time, Emily didn't feel like she was trying to escape her past. She was just living her present. They talked for hours, about small things and big things. She told him she had started painting again. He told her about a new project at work. The conversation flowed easily, as if they'd known each other their whole lives. But beneath the laughter, there was something quieter, a shared understanding that something unspoken had been growing between them. At one point, as she stirred her coffee, Emily said softly, "You know, that night when you stayed with me, I don't think I've ever felt that kind of peace before." Liam looked at her, his expression gentle but serious. "I didn't stay because you needed saving, Emily. I stayed because I wanted to. Because you deserved someone who wouldn't walk away." Her heart ached at the honesty in his voice. She didn't know how to respond. All she could do was hold his gaze and let the silence speak for her. After a long pause, she said, "You've made me believe in kindness again. I thought love was supposed to hurt, but you made it feel calm." Liam smiled faintly. "That's how it should feel. Calm, safe, real." They finished their coffee and walked through the park afterward. The air smelled like spring. Children laughed in the distance, and the sound filled Emily with a sense of hope she hadn't known she could feel again. As they reached the lake, she stopped and turned to him. "Do you ever think people come into our lives for a reason?" "Always," he said. "Some to teach us lessons, some to remind us what we forgot, and some to show us what love really means." Emily felt her throat tighten. She wanted to tell him that she thought he was all three of those things, but the words caught in her chest. Instead, she smiled and said softly, "You have a way of saying the right things. You know that?" He laughed quietly. "I just mean them, that's all." They sat by the lake for a while, watching the water ripple under the sunlight. Emily's heart was full of gratitude, of warmth, of something that might have been love, though she wasn't ready to name it. She didn't need to. Some feelings didn't need labels. They just needed space to grow. As the afternoon faded into evening, Liam walked her back to her car. Neither wanted to say goodbye, but both knew they had to. "I'm glad I ran into you," she said softly. "Me too," he replied. "It's good to see you smiling again. Have you to thank for that?" He shook his head. "No, you did that yourself. I just reminded you that you could." She looked at him for a long moment, trying to memorize everything, the warmth in his eyes, the gentleness in his smile. "Take care, Liam," she said finally. "You too, Emily." He walked away, and she stood there for a moment, watching him disappear down the quiet street. There was no sadness, no ache, just peace. It wasn't the end of something. It was the start of something she didn't need to rush. Weeks turned into months. Emily's art began to attract attention, and she opened a small studio in town. Her paintings told stories of loss and healing, of rain turning into light. People often asked her what inspired her work, and she'd smile and say, "A friend who reminded me what kindness looks like." Liam visited sometimes. They'd have coffee, share quiet moments, and talk about life. There was no pressure between them, no need to define what they were. They simply cared for each other, and that was enough. One evening, as they sat together, in her studio surrounded by her paintings, Liam said, "You've changed, you know?" Emily looked at him curiously. "How so?" "You carry peace now. You used to carry pain." She smiled softly. "Maybe that's what healing looks like," he nodded. "Or maybe it's what love looks like." Their eyes met, and for a moment the air between them grew still. Not tense, not uncertain, just full of quiet emotion. He reached for her hand, gently, like someone holding something fragile but precious. She didn't pull away. They didn't need to say the words. The silence between them said everything. Years later, Emily would look back on that night, the night he stayed, and realize it had changed the course of her life. It wasn't just the moment her heart began to heal. It was the moment she learned that love could exist in kindness, in patience, in quiet presence. Mark was a chapter she had closed, not with bitterness, but with understanding. Liam had shown her what real connection felt like: steady, calm, unspoken, but deeply felt. She often thought of that rainy night, how broken she had been, and how one act of compassion had become the foundation of a new beginning. Now, every time she saw the sunrise, she remembered the warmth of that night, the safety of his shoulder, and the promise he didn't have to make but kept anyway. He stayed. And though life moved on, though things changed as they always do, that memory never faded. It wasn't just a story of heartbreak, it was a story of rediscovery. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive with fireworks or grand gestures. Sometimes it comes quietly, like someone knocking on your door in the rain, willing to stay by your side all night, asking for nothing in return. Emily never forgot that. She never forgot him. And whenever people asked how she managed to rebuild her life after such pain, she'd smile softly and say, "Because someone once stayed when everyone else left." And that made all the difference. That night remained her reminder that love, at its purest, is not about possession or perfection. It's about presence. It's about choosing to stay when it would be easier to walk away. He stayed by her side all night, and she never forgot it.